The Stone Table. Just uttering those three simple words stirs up intense feelings of power, awe, and reverence. The first time those words are mentioned in the Narniad without any deeper exposition, readers instantly know that this is an object of immense importance in the world of Narnia. In fact, the argument could be made that the Stone Table actually serves as the center of the Narnian universe, both in space and time. But as with all things ancient and mysterious, many questions surround the Stone Table. What exactly is it? What was it used for? Where did it come from? Does it have any connection with objects in our world? Now, these are big questions, but I believe that understanding the Stone Table is central to understanding Narnia itself. And today, we're going to take up the task. It's a huge topic that deserves many more videos, but we'll try to unpack as much as we can today. So let's get started. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and step into a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. They were in a green open space from which you could look down on the forest, spreading as far as one could see in every direction, except right ahead. There, far to the east, was something twinkling and moving. "By gum," whispered Peter to Susan, "the sea!" In the very middle of this open hilltop was the Stone Table. It was a great grim slab of gray stone, supported on 4 upright stones. It looked very old, and it was cut all over with strange lines and figures that might have been the letters of an unknown language. They gave you a curious feeling when you looked at them. Now, this is the first time in the Narnia series that we're given a glimpse of this ancient and mysterious relic. And to be honest, the first time I read that passage, I had no idea what the Stone Table was actually supposed to be. I had guessed it might be something similar to King Arthur's Round Table, where Aslan and his council gathered to discuss battle strategies or policy matters. Or maybe it was some sort of huge banquet table that a king might use for some sort of royal picnic or something. But as you read on, you discover that this is something entirely different, with an entirely different purpose. Now, to be clear, Narnian writings about the Stone Table are fairly sparse, but here's what we do know. First and most obviously, it was made of stone. A great gray slab of stone that was supported on 4 sides with smaller upright stones. There's a bit of contention about the height of the stones, but some speculate it must have been fairly short because Lucy and Susan were able to kiss Aslan's cheek as he lay upon it. Now, the table itself is inscribed with ancient runes, strange lines and characters from an unknown language. However, even though the writing could not be understood, it gave observers a curious and probably magical feeling. Now, what are the origins of the table? Well, while some people believe that the table has existed eternally, it's not really known when it was actually created. But we do know, at the very least, it was conceptualized by the Emperor across the sea before the very dawn of time itself. We know this because there's even deeper magic from before the dawn of time that lays out some of its rules of operation and its purpose. Now, we'll get deeper into the purpose of the table in just a bit, but first, let's talk about the appearance of the table throughout recorded Narnian history. Of course, it was most famously the site of Aslan's sacrifice at the hands of Jadis the White Witch, but its first mention was recorded in NT 1000, when Mr. Beaver led Lucy, Peter, and Susan Pevensey on a journey to rendezvous with Aslan and his army at the Hill of the Stone Table. For the children personally, this site held deep significance because it was the first time they ever met Aslan face to face, which is perhaps a bit of foreshadowing of even greater significance than they could have ever realized. The next mention comes over 1,000 years later, during the time of the War of Rebellion, which was led by Prince Caspian and his rebel army. During some point in time over the millennium, a huge earthen mound had been constructed over the table, creating a hill on a hill, and is known as the Hill of the Stone Table, or, more prominently, Aslan's How. How being derived from the Old Norse name meaning mound or cairn. Now, the How was hollowed out and contained a labyrinth-like series of stone chambers, at the center of which was the ancient Stone Table. Now, by now, its magic inscriptions had nearly faded due to being exposed to the wind and rain for hundreds of years. Now, interestingly enough, before the table had broken, It didn't seem to show these signs of aging, even though it had been placed in Narnia for 1,000 years. This is possibly an indication that until the table was broken, it had been under some sort of magical spell or protection or preservation, and after it was split, the magical enchantment may have ended. Nevertheless, it was still a site considered by all to be deeply magical. So magical, in fact, that Caspian predicted that Susan's horn would call the Pevensies back to that very spot. Its sense of magic was so strong that Nickabrick, a hag, and a werewolf believed that it could even be a site where the dead were raised, given the right incantations. Yes, for the people of Narnia, this was a place of deep and ancient magic that was meant to be revered and respected. That's why it's so striking that after the events of the Narnian Rebellion, the stone table is only mentioned once more in all of recorded Narnian history, when the stone knife is discovered on Ramandu's Island, which, by the way, had been placed on another type of magical table. After that, no mention of the Great Stone Table was ever again written in the Narnian record. Why it disappeared, we could only speculate, but I believe that it was an indication that Narnia had lost its way, that the things of old had been forgotten, forsaken even, and Aslan was neither known nor revered in most of the world. So that's the history of the table, but we still haven't answered the big questions. What is the table exactly? What was its purpose? How did it work? Why was it created? Well, I believe that we can even better answer those questions by comparing it to objects and relics found in our own world. And so, here are 4 objects that I believe inspired the creation of the stone table. Number 1, a sacrificial altar. First of all, it's not really a table, at least not in the sense that we think about most tables today. Tables are warm, inviting places where people gather together for good things, meals, camaraderie, community. This was not a table you would want to eat from, nor would you want to gather around it. No, this table had real weight to it, both literally and figuratively. First and foremost, this table was an altar. It was a sacrificial altar, to be precise. Reminiscent of several altars described in the Bible, many made of stacked stones and built in a table-like appearance. Long before we witness an actual sacrifice on the stone table, we discover that it had apparently been the site of other blood sacrifices in the past. We learn a bit about the gruesome nature of the stone table in a conversation with Jadis and her servant, who were discussing her plans to kill Edmund. "I would like to have it done on the stone table itself," said the witch. "That is the proper place. That is where it has always been done before." "It will be a long time now before the stone table can again be put to its proper use," said the dwarf. "True," said the witch, and then, "Well, I will begin." We later find out that this is a place where justice is served to traitors of Narnia who, according to the laws of deep magic, are lawful prey for the bloodthirsty Jadis. It is here at this stone table that the traitors are sacrificed. Now, according to the laws of deep magic, these sacrifices are not merely permitted, they are in fact necessary. For as Jadis points out, and even Aslan cannot deny, the very existence of Narnia depends on it. If the blood of traitors is not spilled on the altar, all of Narnia would actually be overturned and would literally perish in fire and water. So when a person turned against Narnia, which had presumably happened many times throughout Narnian history, they were not only putting themselves in danger, they were putting the entire world in danger. Turning against Narnia was an offense that the deep magic could not just overlook. Justice demanded that things be put right, and that could only happen at the stone table. So the sacrificed blood actually serves to preserve the life of the rest of the citizens of Narnia. And that's why when Jadis laid her claim to Edmund's life, Aslan was unable to deny the witch her prey. To do so would mean certain doom for all of Narnia. Now, as we know, Aslan provided another way to satisfy those demands for justice. He sacrificed himself in place of Edmund. Number 2, stone tablets. Now, while the stone table is certainly an altar, it is also unique in the fact that it was inscribed with markings that recorded the laws of the deep magic. In our world, the book of Exodus describes a set of stone tablets that were given to Moses. On these tablets were a set of laws that were inscribed not by Moses, but by the very finger of God. Now, interestingly enough, the Ten Commandments, technically a second copy, were contained in something known as the Ark of the Covenant. Now, you may know it from the second best Indiana Jones movie. Now, recently, a team of archaeologists at the site of Beth Shemesh have uncovered what they believe may have been the resting place for the Ark, which could have also held the stone tablets. And this was a great stone table. Number 3, ancient tombs. Now, at its most basic description, the stone table would be described as a sort of megalithic structure. And in doing my research for this episode, I realized I had seen something very similar to the stone table years ago while touring the Irish countryside. These megalithic structures are known as dolmens. Now, C.S. Lewis himself, who grew up in Ireland and lived his life in the heart of England, was undoubtedly familiar with these, as there are nearly 200 dolmens scattered throughout the Irish countryside. Now, get this, it's actually speculated that the name for this object actually comes from Old Welsh words tal main, which mean, wait for it, stone table. So what were dolmens used for? Well, believe it or not, they were used as tombs. And so one single object served not only as a place of sacrifice in accordance to the law written on it by its creator, but also as a tomb for the one offered as the sacrifice. Now, there's one other type of megalithic structure that closely resembles the stone table. In fact, the most famous megalithic structure in the world was practically in C.S. Lewis's backyard. Just an hour's drive away from his home in Oxford was the ancient site of Stonehenge. Now, while the origins and purposes of Stonehenge are still debated to this day, Lewis, as a scholar of medieval literature, would have been very familiar with the Arthurian legend of Stonehenge. According to this legend, Stonehenge was brought to England from Ireland with the help of the great wizard Merlin. In this legend, these stones were healing stones, and the site was a place where the sick and dying would come to be set free from their infirmaries. And for Edmund Pevensey, thanks to Aslan's sacrifice, the stone table certainly proved to be a place where one could be set free from impending death. Because, as Aslan explained, when a willing victim who has committed no treachery was killed in a traitor's stead, the table would crack and death itself would start working backwards. Much like the tearing of the veil in the ancient Hebrew temple, the stone table is now broken. It should never be used again as a sacrificial altar. Now, one last note about Stonehenge and the stone table. We know that in Narnia, from the top of the stone table hill, a person could see all the way off to the far horizon of the great Eastern Ocean. Back at Stonehenge, the site is carefully arranged to face due east, so that on the day of the summer solstice, the monument aligns perfectly with the rising sun. Could it be that the site of the stone table also pointed eastward, toward the great unknown of the Eastern Ocean? After all, in a very real way, it was the stone table itself that marked the essential first step for any dawn treader who would take the journey to Aslan's country. Well, that's all the time we have for today. A big thank you to the King of Narnia, Will, and the High Kings of Narnia, Matt and Augustine. If you'd like to support this channel, you can find the link to my Patreon in the description below. I look forward to seeing you next time as we take another journey into the wardrobe.